Okay, I am back. Can everybody see the screen okay and hear me all right?
Yes, I can see.
All right, let me change my name here. I'm Tom, not Angie. Okay, guys, I am Tom Fulkerson. I'm your qualifying broker, and today is Contracts 101, Part 1 of a four-part series that we do every Monday at 1 o'clock. So today we are going to be reviewing Part 1. And for those of you who are new or newer, if you've written contracts, this may be a bit repetitive, but I think it's always great to have a good refresher. So we always suggest that you have a checklist of tasks before you write an offer. In other words, you need to have your DocuSign or Lone Wolf FMLS training done, schedule your buyer consultation, get your buyer brokerage agreement signed, discuss the compensation payment options with your buyer, check availability and schedule showings through showing time, contact the listing agent to request a pre-showing compensation agreement, the F-258, obtain a pre-qualification letter from your buyer's lender, probably the most important step in preparing an offer, and do a search of sold comps in the neighborhood, and always contact your home inspector to check their availability to help you decide how many days of due diligence that you need to ask for. If any of this needs, if you all need to raise your hand, ask a question, I love to have a little input. So the first thing we're going to do is schedule your buyer consultation with your buyer. In this example, in this class today, we're working with buyers. The same would apply if you're working with a seller. You're going to discuss the compensation and get the buyer brokerage agreement signed prior to showing the property. Here is an example of your exclusive buyer brokerage agreement. It's the GAR F110. We've highlighted some items in yellow on this example that include the agency and brokerage, the compensation, how much you're going to be charging the buyer, and then under 4D, the buyer's going to give you the consent for the seller or the seller's broker to pay your compensation. This amount can never exceed what you've agreed to with the buyer. So if you're agreeing to 3% and the seller's offering a 4% compensation, then you would have to go back and amend this agreement so that the buyer agrees that you're to receive that extra 1% in this case. The buyer must acknowledge that the seller or the seller's broker is not legally obligated to pay the buyer broker compensation, and that they should understand their financial obligation before going under contract to purchase a property. This particular buyer brokerage agreement also, we've highlighted compensation for professional services of the broker. What is defined as the protection period. Please make sure that's always the protection period is always filled out with a number of days to protect your compensation in case the buyer defaults on your agreement. We have highlighted broker's duties under the to the buyer and the buyer's duties to the broker, which are always important. They need to agree to be available, to timely respond, to provide accurate information, inspect the property and read disclosures, work exclusively with the broker, in parentheses agent, and disclose any previous broker relationships and not to contact for sale by owners directly. On page 6 of our buyer brokerage agreement, we get into definitions and disclaimers. of hazardous conditions, holding the broker harmless, no imputed knowledge, and definition of notice between buyer and broker. We have also highlighted for your reading enjoyment the buyer default, and the buyer defaults on the contract or mutually terminates a purchase sale agreement. Buyer unilaterally terminates the buyer brokerage agreement is a default. Buyer enters into a contract where broker is not paid any compensation. Please note, only a broker can sue for compensation. Why is it important? When we get calls from buyers who say, I no longer want to work with your agent and I want a mutual termination, more than likely they've been coached by another agent from another company, because most general consumers out there don't know the difference between a unilateral and a mutual termination, or they wouldn't even know that that existed if had another agent not told them that. But just so you know, we rarely ever allow a mutual termination. I always want to try and keep and protect your compensation rights with your buyer. And so if you have any questions about that, I'm happy to address it. On page 7 of our brokerage agreement, it talks about cyber fraud warning, which is pretty rampant. Seller ID theft, even more rampant. Brochures you need to provide to the buyers, including the GAR CB13, protecting yourself when buying real property. And note, you must email all the exhibits that are references attached to the buyer when you email the EBBA, but you do not have to, they don't have to be filled out, signed, or initialed. And all that means is if you are sending the buyer brokerage agreement to your buyer to sign electronically and you have attachments on that agreement, they need to be sent along with the agreement. All right, there is new language for proper legal signatures for entities. This is the signature page of our buyer's acceptance of our buyer brokerage agreement. And the buyer's contact information that is required is their email address, phone number, and current mailing address. The brokerage and agent information include the name of the brokerage, the broker's license number, the broker phone and fax number. I don't really send your documents back without a fax number. We rarely use faxes in today's world, so fax number is not quite as important, but the broker phone number is ultimately important. The agent's name, your license number, your phone number, and your email address. All those are required and highlighted in yellow under your broker affiliated licensee contact information, along with filling out the acceptance date of when it is accepted by the buyer. So if you have an entity or an LLC that you're working with, the new correct way for signing that is, in this example, Angela Meza Smith as managing member, RE School of Georgia, LLC, and then the email address. The incorrect way would be if it said RE School of Georgia LLC as the buyer signature, and then RE School of Georgia LLC, and then the email address of the signer. That is the incorrect way. So it always has to be the name of the person, and if they're a managing member or president or whatever their relationship is with the LLC purchasing the property. So do we have any questions about the exclusive buyer brokerage agreement before we move on? Okie dokie. We always ask that you seek to obtain the F-258, which is the pre-showing compensation agreement from listing agent prior to showing and preparing a purchase offer, and discuss the compensation payment options with the buyer. To be honest with you, not a lot of agents follow this protocol. Most listing agents today, please write in your commission on the F-259 and attach it to your offer. That still doesn't make it as buttoned up as if you have that F-258 and you know up front what the listing agent and the seller is offering in terms of compensation. So here is an example of the pre-showing compensation agreement. I'm not going to go into great detail over it because a lot of agents don't use it today. I'm not saying it's a good idea not to use it, but it seems as though the common practice today is for the buyer's agent to ask the listing agent what the seller is paying prior to showing the property, and then you write it into the contract on the F-259. I still of the school that we like to have it in writing before we show the property on the F-258. So there you have it. So if you don't get it, obviously you want to add the F-259, the broker compensation agreement exhibit, to be included with your purchase and sale offer. And here is the buyer brokerage compensation exhibit. There are two check boxes. One is if the seller is paying the buyer broker directly, or the other option is if the listing agent is sharing their percent with the buyer broker. I'm seeing about 50-50. A lot of agents still collect the full commission and share it with the buyer broker. A lot of sellers prefer just to pay the buyer broker directly because they negotiated a little bit better that way sometime on the purchase and sale agreement. But nonetheless, you need to have this included. Even if you have a 258, because the 258 also has expiration date on there. I had an example a couple of years ago where a buyer's agent got an F-258 from the listing agent, and by the time she wrote the offer, it had expired, and she didn't write the F-259 into her agreement, and she did not get paid by the seller. I don't know if her buyer paid her anything or not, but always include the F-259 with your offer and just find out if the seller's paying you directly or is the listing agent sharing the compensation. Let's see, where are we? Okay, here we go. So here is the copy of our pre-qualification letter, and here is an example of contacting your home inspector prior to. And why that's important is that if you have a home inspector that you like to use and they can get out to the property in a day or two, it may help you decide that you need less days of due diligence than if you hadn't contacted them. Sometimes the due diligence makes a huge difference in whether you are able to lock down that property or not. So please keep that in mind. Do we have any questions today about how to prepare your first offer? Okay, if we don't, then I want to remind you all that we have a dedicated broker email hotline, broker@heartatl.com. Any questions or help that you need, you can certainly email us. That goes to my personal email. It goes to Angie Mesa-Smith's, our managing broker's personal email, and whoever can get to it first will do so. And if there are no further questions, please join us next week for our Contracts 101 Part 2, and Angie will be hosting that next week.
Thank you, Tom.
Everybody have a great week and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you.